Right, ladies and gentlemen, keeping you on your toes today because I'm opening up the podcast for one and probably the only time only if I can't get my words out. But yeah, welcome to the Two PTs One podcast with your host, Myles Harrison, and my co host, Mike Ellis. Today on episode 26, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, it is 26. We are going to be talking about emotions and how they influence your eating habits and vice versa. This will be a very interesting topic to talk about today because me and Michael have very strong opinions on the matter at hand, and this can relate to a very few things indeed. So, to give you all a quick explanation of how your eating habits can be affected by your emotions, is that when you are highly stressed, um, your stress levels is very linked to your hunger hormones, which is called ghrelin. And as your stress rises as well, your hunger hormones increases as well. So there's a very big correlation between eating habits and emotions, but it also goes a lot more deeper into that. So let's get straight into the podcast. Let's go.
Yeah, obviously, me and Myles normally plan a podcast, and yesterday we got into quite I think, I wouldn't say heated because we both agreed with it, but you have generally two issues when it comes to calories. Obviously, everyone's got the same goal of putting on weight, maintaining weight, or losing weight. However, the way you do it, obviously, if we went into an energy balance, would be pretty simple. It's you increase movement or you decrease calories. But can you decrease calories too much, and that generally will start to affect everything? So we went quite serious in the fact of saying an example yesterday, whereby actually I think we need a bit of backstory to it really, and like a bit of progress into the story itself. Because for me, if you're dieting or if you're a coach, it's not just your decision to diet. You have to speak to the people that are around you, because obviously it's going to be a different kind of way of living. You've got to be with people that understand that you are dieting, not try and sabotage you whilst you diet. But then also they need to understand how you might change personality wise, mood wise, on certain days, whereby what we said was if you are in a relationship and you drop your calories too low, can this affect your mood? Can it affect your sex life? And then they will love onto your partner, put you two in a bad place, and then end up just making your relationship worse, purely for the fact that you're just not getting the food that you require. Now, obviously, that's a pretty big link.
That's an extreme case there. Some people are definitely going, "Wow."
Yeah, but this is where planning and being efficient with your calories and understanding what works and what doesn't work is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think if we are talking about first of all a calorie deficit and how that affects physicality and psychology, it's not going to be, well, if you reduce it by this much amount, it's going to affect this. It doesn't work. It depends on people to people, but I think the first thing you got to look at is, are you in the right environment in the first place to put yourself in a calorie deficit? Because, for example, if you got, let's say, your high stress at work, your mental state's not in the greatest, like I said, like relationships not in the finest, or any other things that causing a great stress, 100% adding a calorie deficit to it isn't going to help you. If you're restricting yourselves from eating the amount of foods that you have or your favorite foods and stuff like that, it's going to have a negative effect. And that's how environmental effects and your emotions affect eating. But then if you flip that around, and then let's say, for example, you're trying to create a bigger deficit, whether that's reducing foods very quickly or doing fuck ton of cardio and stuff like that, and you're not giving your body the amount of food it needs to fully recover or even the rest that it needs to fully recover, as well as physical stresses that you're going to have, there's a lot of psychological effect on that as well. Now, obviously, as well, our bodies not made to lose fat. We store fat to protect ourselves. It's a proper survival mechanism and stuff like that. So our body hates the idea of losing fat. Yet we've now started to get ourselves into an industry of whether we want to lose fat or weight or gain muscle or gain fat to gain muscle and stuff like that. There's very much middle ground at the moment. So we're seeing now a lot of people effectively going in these kind of like yo-yo diets where they're massively cutting down their calories for a short period of time, having these bad effects and stuff like that. Next thing you notice, like they're putting on more calories to consume more food. Then they use scales as like a kind of metric for measuring, and that's a big disaster in itself because obviously, if you've been cutting your calories low for very long and you don't do a lot of movement, the moment you start eating a load of food, you're going to put a lot of weight on. And I don't particularly mean fat. Simply, it can be fat. But what I mean by that is the fact that when you starve yourself in that way, saying your body next thing you know, if you give it a load of food, your body's going to want to retain that as much as that, especially in water weight. And that's why you see after people dieting for a long period of time, massive insights of weight increase after like I think after putting on more food and stuff like that. And it doesn't mean particularly straight away. It means it's a conclusion of right, more weight's gone up, that equals fat. Because either way, when you go from if you've done cutting or calorie, if you've been dieting for a good amount of time and you've been doing it right and you've took yourself time periods and stuff like that and you put a little bit more food into your diet, naturally you're going to see the weight go up because you're giving it more fuel. If it's more carbohydrates into your system, you're going to have more water retention and stuff like that. There's a load of components into it as well. But regardless, in my opinion, a lot of it first comes from your mental state right now, rather than the food that you're putting into you. Now, I do think they have effects. I think they bounce off each other, but I think the first ultimate thing that generally happens is your mental state. Because if you're very much in the mental state of, let's say, for example, you want to lose weight very quickly because you're not happy with your body, and then you've got these external things pushing you go forward. Let's say, for example, into debates now, like April, June, when we're allowed to do a little bit more and stuff like that. If you're in the current mindset of I've got to do this, I've got to do this very quickly and stuff like that, then the more quickly the sacrifice you've got to make, the quicker the bounce or the quicker the effect you're going to feel things and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't take that into consideration. Now I know I don't know in your opinion, Mike, and stuff like that, but there are people out there that say there are no issue with quick fast diets that help lose fat very quickly, but there's in my mind when you do something like that, there's a lot of sacrifices straight away, and there's a lot of a rebound, not of a rebound, sorry, a lot of an what's the word I'm trying to think of, a lot of like an effect from things very quickly. You start noticing psychological things very quickly.
The thing is for me, like obviously we're just jumping straight off the original podcast here for 25. But imagine being in the position where if your basal metabolic rate, what your body just needs is 2000. You're like, nah, I need to cheat this and I'm going to be on 1600. And then obviously that's just food. So you're already below what your body requires. And then you're going to say, oh, I'm going to go do half an hour on a treadmill on the side. Now, obviously, that's a pretty hefty deficit, all in this ambition of getting to the pub. And then what you're going to do when you get there, sink 5 pints. Like, how do you think your body's going to respond to when it's been deprived of everything that it knows is good and effective for the body? Food. And then you're going to go and put something where alcohol is, where, especially if it's not a smarter choice, because you're catching up from 3 months how do you think this is mentally going to deal with you? Like, you're just going to beat yourself up mentally. Your body's just going to basically reject it and just feel crap for it as well. And then you're going to be stuck at day one. And then you're mentally stressed. So then what you do, you reverse it back and be like, oh, I just need some food to make myself feel better. Next thing we know, we're at 3,000 calories. All Myles has just said about food going right up and then just getting stored in the body straight away happens. And then we're stuck again. And it's a revolving door of being in a crap mindset because you've pressured yourself so much to be in such a deficit to make such results. Whereas you can come in and say, I know how to prepare for this in an efficient way. It might not be as quick, but it will be effective long term.
Yeah, I think, and when we're talking about stuff like this, we're not talking about you general. I just want to lose like £5.
Yeah.
Because that can be, that doesn't need as much preparation and stuff. That could easily just be quite easily changed by fusing things and stuff like that. But if it's something like you need to lose a couple of stone or 34 pounds or something, I'm just throwing these numbers out there. There's not specifics, but there's a lot more going on there than just your eating habit. You're getting to the point where you need to change that much about you. It's not just a eating solution; it's a whole life solution. And you're looking at obviously the obvious things, your activity levels, your eating habits, and stuff like that. But you're looking at your psychological health as well. You're looking at your environments that you're putting yourself into. You might be looking at things like work life. You might be looking at the people that are around you. Like, there's so many factors that make you. I can't remember who said this, but you are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And that makes true and stuff. Have you got people around you who are not the healthiest? They don't understand the gym. They eat the rubbish. They go to McDonald's every week and stuff like that. If you spend more time with them, 100%, without you noticing, you will swing that way. And that's a thing and stuff like that. And there's some of the things you need to think about. And obviously, Mike was saying before about that kind of support group. If you're deciding to make these positive changes on your health, it shouldn't be from I'm doing this because I want to get this person to like me, or doing this to get these people to like me and stuff like that. Like, I understand the connected part of human nature, but I truly believe that if ultimately you're happy and you're making yourself more of a happier person, you will attract more happier people into your life. And if you're getting yourself into a healthier lifestyle where you're exercising more, you're training more and stuff like that, the people that you spend your time now with might not be the people you spend your time with when you get that goal. And there's some things you need to think about. But a lot of things that I see when it comes to people want to lose a lot of weight, I hate to say weight, but fat, is the fact that they're not patient enough. They want instant gratification. And that's in the world that we live in today. We are living in a world where we've got to do A, B, and C to equal D. We can't forget about the outcome, and we can't enjoy the process. And that's it. That's in my mind, a recipe for disaster, because there's so much that needs to change, but it doesn't just need to happen all the time. Like I said, the more sacrifices you make, the more of a response that's going to have to happen to you and stuff like that. And it bounces back, and your body is very quick, very clever in going. If you do, let's say, for example, if you do cut your calories very quickly, your body's very good going, and one step ahead of you, mate. Like, your body will literally shut down. It will make you move less. It will make you not be in the mood to exercise. It will make you, or it can all, I've seen it in the cast that it all makes you a completely different human being. Let's say, like, let's go to the complete stream of bodybuilders and stuff like that. Now, obviously, I've got some kind of experience within bodybuilding because my granddad was a bodybuilder, and I know people around me with bodybuilding. So I've kind of, especially my own start fitness life, I grew up in that kind of environment, so I've seen things about that. But the extreme case of when they're at their leanest, when they're about to go on a show and stuff like that, they're almost a half a person that they knew. And the next thing you know, it's just like you see them a couple of weeks later after the shows, and they've put on a ton of weight, and not only because there's this thing of when you cut calories for so long, your metabolism starts to slow down, you get metabolic damage and stuff. I mean, if that happens, that's extreme case. There's been studies where people have been put on 600 calories for a very long period of time, and their maintenance or their metabolic rate, should I say, has gone back to normal within months. There's so many studies and stuff like that. So you can't blame it on metabolic damage. But the reason why they bounced back so much is because they were so far away from where they were, and the habits that they made. They haven't spent enough time changing habits, which takes time. They haven't changed the lifestyle around them. They haven't changed the people around them who they need to be. And I'm not saying you need to cut people out of your lives, but you need to make these kind of decisions when you come. It's like, but they're the reasons why they bounce back, and they bounce back this twice as much because almost it's almost like psychological in the thing that when you want something so badly, you tend to almost forget about all the surroundings about it and tend to go double the amounts in, especially if it's got a very emotional charge to it. And obviously, with humans and food, we very much have that. As bodies, like when we see a high calorie food, we all of our senses know that's high calorific. We want that more because of that reason, because it's a survival mechanism.
Quick question for you.
Go ahead.
Do you think stress causes weight gain?
If we're talking about water retention, yeah. If we're not talking so correlation in the fact that when you're more stressed, you tend to eat more. Well, it depends on people to people. If you stress, some people tend to eat more. Some people tend to eat less. I'm not 100% sure why that affects people differently. There's probably a reason thing that I probably missed over and stuff like that. But at this current moment, I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it affects people massively. But when you do become more stressed, you tend to move less. You tend to get more agitated. You tend to go for the foods that you know you shouldn't really have because, especially in this society, like I could definitely think for the food top of my head now. Like when bad things happen, there are certain food groups that come away. Let's say Ben and Jerry's when you break up with a relationship and stuff like that. I've heard so many people say, oh, "I'm gonna have some Ben and Jerry's and ice cream and stuff like that." Pizza on a movie night. There's so many food that affects food that's related to events.
Yeah.
And they're not very much like you don't hear, "Oh, I'm gonna have a cucumber with my Netflix and chill tonight." It's like, well, for some people that might be an interesting Saturday night. But you kind of get my idea. You're not going to relate very enjoyable foods, not enjoyable foods, very healthy, dense foods with certain events. It's generally going to be the most that tastes the best and stuff like that.
Because I only really ask that because obviously, if you are in such deficit because you're just self-imposing it to yourself, are you creating more stress and a cortisol response from the body itself, which will then cause your personal stress responses of potentially eating foods that you shouldn't be eating and causing a weight gain? So, are you potentially self-sabotaging yourself by being too far into a deficit and sort of being like, I think it's a scale everyone puts on. Like I put one on my Instagram the other day about being like really good for during Monday to Thursday and then having a self-sabotage day on your Friday and Saturday because you're putting yourself in such a deficit which is causing so much stress to yourself that you're like, oh, I need to get to the weekend and have like a relaxed weekend. And if you're not counting calories, you're probably just doing the extent or the damage to your calorie intake and causing a surplus just to try and make yourself feel better from all the stress that you've been having from being in such a deficit. So are you really in a deficit by causing such a heavy one?
So I'm just writing something here and stuff like that. I think it all depends. It's not something you can go. It's not something you can particularly put a black and white statement on. Um, there's so many different situations when it comes to stuff like that. I definitely agree in the fact that it's almost like a vicious circle in that kind of sense. Like if you stress, you eat bad, and then you get stressed about eating bad, and then you eat bad because you've been more stressed and stuff like that. And it's almost like you've heard me say in a few podcasts. It's like when you put a meaning or something to if you put a meaning to like an event or something that's happened, whether that's like say let's say for example you've decided to eat more than you intend for. Let's say, for example, like you plan on eating 1,600, but then you have a pizza and it goes up to 2,000, and you relate something bad to that meaning. Well, that meaning is then going to correlate to an action. Oh, I'm going to completely cut my calories. Oh, I'm going to do 5,000 Ks and stuff like that. I'm going to do loads of running, rowing, sprinting. And then that's going to relate to results. And then that's going to continue and continue and continue. Carry
It
on.
also demonizes food as well. It
Say
makes
that again.
it also demonizes food in respect of like if you have certain foods when you feel bad, you look at certain foods again. Like if you went for an Italian, you'd be like, oh, I can't have pizza. It just makes me feel like this or reminds me of this.
Well, you hear it down. You hear it like when people's, let's say carbohydrates. Carbohydrates probably get the most wrath at the moment, especially because keto is probably on top of the diet train at the moment, and everyone understands the massive importance of protein. Carbohydrates still takes a massive hit. Now, obviously, I've mentioned before um, about manipulating carbohydrates and obviously using the amount of carbohydrates you eat as a fuel kind of base regarding your activity. But I'm basing of an activity level, let's say for a sport or something like that. If you're doing a football and you're playing 90 minutes, you're going to need more food, more carbohydrates to fuel you in that situation. But yeah, a lot of people like still have this very bad relationship, and relationships with food is a completely different topic and stuff like that because in the meanings, like it's almost asking the question of like, what is the actual meaning of food? Is it is it a calorie? Is it a macro? Is it based on the food itself? Is it something else? Um, and it depends again on people to people, depending on their activity levels and stuff like that. But a lot of people are demonizing food first before they look at their own actions. It's that they're putting like a blame on something else. Oh, I'm not losing weight because there's pizza in the world. It's like, no. It's like the reason why you're not losing weight is because you're eating over your maintenance and putting yourself in a bloody surplus. That's the reason why you're putting weight on.
I'll ask you one question. It's going to
I
be
love how you're putting your hand up. It's like, please,
I,
sir.
like I don't want to interrupt anyone, so I'm like,
Yeah, I've got a very strong relationship with it just because I've been through this all myself.
well, it's a funny thing where people think it doesn't actually exist, but if I guarantee it, I can ask you one question, you'll come up with an answer.
Go ahead.
You're on a night out, and there is one drink that you just can't drink because it reminds you of being ill or whatever. What is it?
Oh, I think my next question should be, how many drinks can I say? There's been so many. Oh man.
That drink that just makes you
If
feel.
if I hear the word sambuca, I think sambu death.
Yeah. So like
Like,
in relation, that applies to some people with food,
yeah.
and it's like they hear. I was going to freaking say lasagna then, but there's no point. People will sit with pizza, and it'd be like pizza. Oh no, I had that when I was in that phase of putting a lot of weight on, so I can't have that.
Yeah.
And it's like you're demonizing food for the fact that it just reminds you of a traumatic time. I bet you anyone that's over the age of 20, you can say to them that question about booze and they will have an answer. But if you say it with food, they will hesitate, which is the funniest thing because everyone, if they thought about it, probably does have that phase of being like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm thinking. And that's like an emotional eating aspect, reminding you to sort of like a traumatic time. Obviously, I am not a full nutrition coach, and I am not a psychologist. I just like to help people where I can. But this is direct correlations between what people perceive and how they want to look at things.
Yeah.
Are you getting content ideas written down?
I'm literally just like springing ideas in my head. I'm trying to write at the same time, but I'm almost writing as worse as I did when I was in like year 2. So I'm going to stop that. No, I fully 100% agree with you and stuff like that. And it's again, I think a lot of it all stems from, first of all, you. I think it pretty well is. It's pretty much you as a person. Yes, you, Mike. I directly blame everything that every person's got issues on. It's my callous people. Let's put a warning sign. Let's say the prize is probably about 50p.
But I love pizza.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like like newsflash. You can still eat pizza and still lose weight. You can still eat a banana and gain weight. Like that doesn't mean that them two foods that I've just mentioned are the sole reasons why you're gaining weight or losing weight. But everything, actually, a good way of explaining this is it's not the poison itself that kills you, it's the dose that it gives you. So if you eat like water, is a fantastic way of explaining this. We are made predominantly of water. We need water to survive. But if you drink too much water, you will drown. Like, it sounds a bit grim. It is very grim, but it gets the message a point. Now, obviously, when we're talking about emotions, this will vary not only to humans, but from males and females massively. Now, obviously, the more I research into female physiology and psychology, I think, thank God, I am not a woman. I think to myself, a man. So I will give my round of applause for the females right here. And that's not to make jokes and stuff like that. It is true. Like, on a hormonal level, not even on their mesocycles and stuff like that, but on a hormone level, on hours and dailies and stuff like that, the amount of hormones and changes that women go through is a massive amount. And it can really make dieting very hard. There's sometimes, especially in that cycle that I've just mentioned before, where you're probably going to have to eat a little bit more food to work with your body weight and stuff like that. And it's without trying to go too much, because if I went into detail with it and stuff like that, I could easily be here for an extra half an hour explaining it. So exactly. I'll leave that there, and the fact that it needs to be more individual when it comes to, especially when it comes to thinking like that. Another thing I would probably also mention the fact that I've just literally just got off my mind now. What's going on in my head?
Well, I was going to ask you actually something.
Go ahead.
Obviously, we're talking about emotions within calories, but then we've mentioned other diets before in the past, and I heard something on another podcast about 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And discussing the fact of why certain diets are diets, etc., etc. But then realistically, when you come down to it, at an emotional level and just at a survival level, it's whatever you can get your hands on. Emotionally, I feel like with vegans, like emotionally, like they're driven by what they know. But if it came down to it and someone chucked you in the woods, or chucked anyone in the woods, they're not going to bypass something like berries, or if they had the equipment to hunt and cook something, they're going to eat what they could eat.
Yeah, but we're very lucky enough in the society or where we are right now to not be in that predicament where I need to now go and look at somewhere else. I can easily just go to a shop and buy some food. But when we're looking, especially when we're looking at diet cultures, and this is what I mean. Like, it's come to the point now where we're creating groups and socials based of a food group, veganisms, playabilism, I can't get my words out. Like ketogenics, the what's the one Placio date? Is it Placio? What's the one where it's literally just caveman diet? Is it past paleo? Paleo? That's it. There's so many diets I've lost track. But, and I'm not saying that if you want to do them, go ahead. Be my guest. But there's a reason why we eat the food that we eat. And if we cut out a complete macronutrient, regardless of what it is, we're going to see some effects. Like, and the thing is like, a lot of people will throw studies at me. It was like, well, what about this study and stuff? Like, this study says this. A lot of studies out there are very biased. They're looking for a particular result. A good example is that Netflix documentary that came out a year ago.
I was going to say, it's so one-sided.
That's what I mean. And
people feel guilty.
The one of the tests that nearly threw me out of it was when they did the blood test for the free athletes. If you know this, if you know the Netflix series I'm talking about, it'll probably come into my head. You know what I'm on about, but I'll go on anyway. And they showed 3 athletes, and one of them ate fats, like red meat and stuff like that, and one of them just ate. The 2 of them ate leafy diets. And they showed a blood test. I think it was like half an hour or something like that. Or no, an hour after the thing, and they showed how much nitrons and fats and stuff like that are in the blood. And obviously, it was very clear that the fats were in the blood system very after the thing. But what they didn't take in consideration that fats, particularly, take an hour to get into your bloodstream and stuff like that. So they knew that sense. That's why when you want to look at research papers and stuff like that, you want to look from 2 sides of the story and hopefully get one that's non-biased. Because if it says some things and stuff like that, and it says the result straight away, what they're trying to look for, it's going to be a very biased opinion. Very biased opinion.
Like reading the abstract on all your articles.
Yeah, exactly. That's what to do when you're looking at research papers. It's look at research papers, but look at journals and how they got up to that point. And don't just scroll all the way down and look at the abstract and the result of it and stuff like that, because you miss out a lot of the key informations and stuff like that.
Game changers.
That's it. Boom. Game changers.
Yeah, I think. How long have we been on this one?
This episode?
Yeah.
About half an hour.
Okay. Do you want to do a 2-parter?
Let's get it all done in this one.
Ooh.
Keep it short and snappy, because it is a big topic, but it's one of them things that it doesn't need to be complicated.
Okay.
I think if it makes a 2-parter, I think we will be going more out of the fact that we'll be going a bit more out of focus of what we're trying to get the message a point, and that's from my opinion.
Yeah. So, like, if you had to summarize 3 points, then.
Oh, based on what?
So the generalization, your best way of approaching it, and what? Yeah, like a couple of points. I'll give you a few because you say it's a 1-episode topic, but I feel like there's a lot.
Oh, this thing can go off into mini subjects we can definitely talk about, but I think for the purpose of this episode, it's good just to base it off the emotions, and then because especially from human beings, we tend to not to like to listen so much about one thing. It's short and snappy, and then we try to think about it, and then we can go on to something else. But then this could also relate into other things, which can maybe get a bit more focus on. So it's almost like chapters in a book.
What would you then say? Keep your eye and something to avoid. Keep your eyes.
When it comes to emotion eating, first of all, watch the language you use it. Like if you say to yourself like, like I can't eat fats now because that's bad and stuff like that and stuff like that, catch that. It might be such a small thing, but that small thing will eventually build up to a massive effect. It'll snowball. It will roll into effect. And probably to avoid this, it's a very hard one. I could say easily patience, but that's not an answer a lot of people don't want to hear. You do need a lot of patience for stuff like this. And you probably, if you have got a really, really, really bad relationship with food to the point where it's really affecting you in the fact that you feel like you need to do so much about this, so much more about this, or so much about this, or you can't eat that much amount of this and that much more amount of that. And I'm talking about extremes. You could argue in a case of you might need to see someone to help. And obviously that's not for me to kind of say about, because I'm not a psychologist. I'm only going off my opinions and my experience. So when it comes to any of these things, especially in these topics, they're very heavily based off our opinions. So you need to go away from this, research on your own, come on your own conclusion, but successfully use clues. And you'll find that things will link up. And if you allow it, again, a key word of allowing, and you allow people to change your perspective in the long term, that will massively help out. But yeah, food is not the issue itself. It is something that we use to survive and to fuel on. But in the wrong correlation, in the wrong context, it can be used as a really bad way of affecting your emotions. And it's not just one on one; they bounce off each other very much and stuff like that.
I was going to say the perception of what you deem healthy and unhealthy, I think, is a big issue. So obviously, everything in terms of food is a fuel to some extent. It's always got benefits.
Yeah, there's a reason why we've come into how many more years of existence that we have on this world, and the reason why we have. Now, another topic we can go into is, in another episode, is obviously supplements and stuff like that, and how they come into play. But the short word on that is the fact that supplements can't replace a balanced diet. They're almost like that cherry on top and stuff like that. And I think if anything, really, I mean, that goes into a point of you can't outrun a bad diet and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a really big discussion debate when it comes to this topic, because it can link into so many things. And that's something we could definitely explore in bits by bits within different episodes and stuff like that. It's already probably been explained in other episodes that we've done previously in the past. But I think to make this kind of as a summary, um, if you allow and change your perception of and your language on certain events, and give yourself a little more time and patience into the matter of changing, because great things do take time to change and stuff like that, you can eliminate pretty much some of the struggles that you're going to have later on, and stuff like that. But yeah, what would you say on top of that, Mike?
I was going to say something else, but then I was like, you were on a mighty flow. So it just makes me laugh when you see companies like Weight Watchers, etc., and they put labels on the foods by saying sin.
Oh yeah, I don't. Yeah, I can't stand that. I remember I was working at M&S, and my boss kept coming to me. He's like, "I can't have that. That's 5 sins," and I was like, "I'm pretty sure your body hasn't got a clue what sins are."
Yeah.
Um.
Not a scientific metric.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that this is obviously going into a bit of a rant, but the fact that a mashed banana isn't a sin, but a whole banana is. Yeah.
Yeah, Weight Watchers, man.
Exactly. Stay away from Weight Watchers. I think it's a good stepping stone, as in the fact of it's getting you on the step of where you want to go. But I think the application of it is misleading, very misleading, stuff like that. people need to start getting a proper information and start education on food and how to manage that.
Funny story.
Right.
So used to work for MyProtein as a live chat, so orders, etc., product advice. But then we also had to do other companies. So because we were classed as health, have you ever heard of Exantive?
No, I haven't actually. I don't think I have.
Company they were doing, and it's basically meal replacement shakes.
Oh, I've seen other companies do that and stuff like that.
So the general advice, and we had training on this, and I just started my personal training, like qualifications, and if the BMI was ridiculously high, people were on 3 shakes a day, which were 200 calories each.
I mean,
I, I,
I mean, you can have shakes. I mean, like they're good for the easy consumption of calories, but I mean, like you're not going to get full of that. You're just going to make it so much harder. Like also as well, like no offense, but most shakes don't taste particularly nice.
we had a tasting day one day, and they're like, "Do you want to try some?" I'm like, "Not really."
So it's like I have a green juice every morning, but I put a lot of like yeah, but I put a lot of like veggies and stuff like that because I'm boring and like taste of food and stuff like that. So I'd rather have a load of shake and just get extra bit of vegetables into my diet. But yeah, shakes is a
Yeah, I don't honestly want to talk about any more about that because I feel like we could go on.
I'll go on a rant. I will go on a massive rant and stuff like that. I can go on a rant as well as about people who don't want to track foods. Like, I understand that in the long term, the idea is not constantly to put digits into your phone and to track calories that way, but it's you would track your finances to look after make sure you got a roof over your house and you're able to spend money on things and you know that. So why wouldn't you do that when it comes to expenditure on your calories? But then again, does that beg the question of does that make calories a financial postulates? Yeah, exactly. It's viewing on all type of sides. Now again, it's we've ended this kind of podcast on a kind of is it or is it not? Um,
Matter of priorities again.
exactly, matter of priorities and values and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, but to put all this into summaries and stuff like that, there is a massive correlation between your emotions and eating, but it all starts down of how your perspective on food and your relationship you have with your environment, your eating habits, goals, all that type of stuff. Don't constantly look for the outcome, something to aim for, but enjoy the process. It's something clearly you need to start getting yourself into. Um,
I bet
right,
you.
Mike,
Yeah, so.
I'm going to give it to you. I've opened up this podcast. You can close it.
So, ladies and gents, if you have found that helpful, please let us know. Drop us a comment, all the good stuff. We are all, as always, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Obviously, YouTube is the video form, and we
So if you
will,
want to see our lovely faces, here we are.
we will always be here to help. So, you will find both of us on Instagram mainly and Facebook. As always, if you've got a question, just drop it our way. Like and subscribe. Have a great week. Hasta luego.
As we are. I'll be to say, ta ta.